Over the next month, the Tyranid swarm gets slowly reduced, as we cautiously fire a few more vortex torpedoes at the largest remaining bioships, and unload fresh supplies of normal torpedoes, then run back to rearm at any free shipyard. The last vortex creates a rift that almost didn't close, and gives me a scare. Millions of demons kept emerging from that rift over a few hours, until the Tyrant Silence managed to suppress it and close it down. However, the howling demons did massacre thousands of bioships before then got ripped to bits and sent back to Immaterium. It seems the current size of the swarm is the cutoff for safe-ish use of the vortex warheads. I muse out loud, and Cygnus agrees with me while sweating bullets. Indeed, Captain. Perhaps my plan to use a warp engine detonation was quite foolish, in hindsight. He mutters in a shy voice. I wave his fears away. This time we were fortunate to receive the amazing torpedoes from Istobon. But even without them, a sacrifice ship will work. We just need to take care how we use it, while the silence is still strong enough. I explain in a calm tone, and I see Rookie take note of that, nodding and muttering to himself. I visit the Zeno artifact hidden under the Geller generator, where Rose spends her days under the reality-imposing blanket of the Geller field. Even in stasis, the empathic link to my contact list still works, although not the rest of the abilities, which possibly need the console to be returned to Pharos, or a similar installation elsewhere. I remember the beacons being part of a large, galactic-wide network, so there should be others. Just like the webways of the Eldar. Maintaining contact with Jiren and my distant family makes everything better, for a few minutes. Rose is barely able to function, so close to the silence, and her weasel-like acolyte has taken over most of the Inquisitor duties, even going around with a Rossite hanging from his neck. Fortunately, his duties take him away from my ship, as he quickly terminates any dissent among our allies, forcing the newcomers to comply and obey to his orders. As more and more traders and nobles and various navy vessels arrive at battlefield, the tides turn in humanity's favor. But these ships need to work in concert and focus fire and keep a tight formation for mutual protection. More time passes, and the fight goes on for a whole year, with Triplex FAL revealing more advanced machines and weapons, and even providing free repair and minor upgrades to sensors and point defense systems for their impromptu allies. If only humanity could work together like this, all the time. Just like they did in the days of the Emperor, right? Every week I rotate out the ground battalions to give equal experience to all my troops, and heal up or repair the damaged grenadiers and marines, or replenish missiles and fuel. The litany is sadly too small and poorly designed for ground support operations. It might be the pimpest light cruiser there is, but that's only in void combat. Lord Whitelance is a real hero on the front lines, slashing into Tyrannid bugs with his power sword and drilling burning holes with the multi-melter gun, his single knight doing the same damage as an Astartes squad. He can't move as fast, and jump pack from crisis to crisis like they do, but the troops always cheer when he stands beside them. They would be safe, now that he is there to protect them. And Minoris did assemble a few power shields to install on his chassis, which increase his defense 10 times. By the second year, we are starting to push back, retaking lost land and even win a few skirmishes in the void, baiting and massacring a few clusters of bioships. By the third year, most of the planet's surface has been liberated, and the shipyards resume minimal operations, refitting and finishing up the smallest navy ships, adding armor plates and extra guns. In the fourth year, a corridor is opened up through the swarm, allowing barges and transport ships to pass through, and bring in fresh supplies. One by one, all the remaining destroyers and frigates are completed, and the Mechanicus resumes completing the first light cruiser. Our fleet strikes become bigger, and we can eliminate 100 bioships at every sortie. Then 200, then 3. By the fifth year, the Tyrannid swarm is in tatters, getting hounded and hunted by packs of torpedo boats and blasted by cruisers and battlecruisers once they were injured and the carapace cracked. So, I make my way to the Fabricator General and gift him my new templates, the Sentinels and the quad lasers and multi-lasers and nearly everything else I can, without infringing the other patents already owned by another Forge World. One of them is a Chimera personnel carrier upgraded with a simple plasma rector and a volcano lance, though no room remains for passengers. It's basically a cheap main battle tank, and even has 2 power shields on the glacis and the turret. With another multi-laser to serve as close defense, this machine should prove itself right here. There are still pockets of Tyranids on the planet and the moons, but chimeras are rated for NBC terrain and the ultraviolet auspex allows fighting in fog or pollution just like in chemical gas or acid rain. The fabricator general pats my shoulder with a tentacle in size. I will try it, Trader Peth. But I doubt the Red Planet will allow mass production for the Liberation Pattern Chimera. It would provide the Astra Militarum with too much firepower and independence of supplies. If only there was a Rhino tank with a similar pattern. He advises me without breaking protocol. The Astartes and their surf auxiliaries can use it then. I do seem to recall to have seen something like that, somewhere. Anyway, the Skitarii would be glad to have superior firepower on their side, right? I ask rhetorically. The Skitarii would be glad to chop off their own arms and legs if a tech priest tells them to, and has the right authorization codes. He chuckles and sputters a few electric crackles, like I said, a good Mechonicus joke. Yes, they will. Now let me see one of those famous Corvette patterns the ancients were so proud of. I provide another data slate and the fabricator examines it for a long minute. As a latter design, the Liberation Pattern Corvette incorporates all the newest discoveries, including quad volcano lances as main batteries, 4 of them, and a plasma cannon with its own dedicated plasma reactor. On the broadsides, there are triple-linked macro cannons with gravity-fed magazines and banks of quad multi-lasers for point defense. Also, armored skirts to the sides, that would protect against acid or plasma, or deflect piercing shells from hitting the weaker armor straight on. He shakes his head slightly. The plasma cannon is nice, but too fickle for mass production. It has to go. The escape shuttle will make the Liberation popular with Navy officers, and those protective panels to the side will provide extra protection, for a few times. Easy to replace after battle as well. But the ancients were wise. That whole plasma cannon turret and its reactor can be installed on the light cruisers already in dock. We'll test the feasibility for a few decades before we decide. I shrug like it doesn't concern me. There are a couple admirals here. You could ask if they would want 3,000 corvettes to fill patrol routes and chase pirates. The fabricator glances at his cogitator, then waves a metallic tentacle in defeat. Of course the Navy would want them. My forge world is still recovering from the invasion, but you, or your house have 2 favors with us. For the STCs and the aid against the Tyranid Xenos. Come back in a few decades if you want ships. He says in a sad voice. Well, I won't push it if things are that bad. Ships can wait. But some nice heavy tanks and replacements for the lost armor during the siege? I wonder in a polite tone. The Magus powers up the holoscreen and lets me see his wares. A dozen more Baneblades, 100 Sentinels, 1,000 Chimeras. This seemed to be an order for a guard regiment, that I will simply get for free. The army will still receive their tanks, but a bit later. A Tyranid invasion was reason enough for a delay. These machines would be enough right now. But they need a bit of work and upgrades. And as a bonus, I will live test the Liberation Pattern Chimeras for free. I offer in a slightly smug voice. Denied. 100 of them will suffice for live testing. I'll even add 500 Hydro anti-air platforms, from the goodness of my heart. The fabricator declares, holding a metal hand over his belly. I think it's a joke, but not so certain. But the balance is not right yet. Anyway, a few tiny things more. My bridge crew might need 7 implants, and the big marine outside too. Anti-aging injections for my clan. The flesh is weak, as you surely know, fabricator. I demand with an innocent voice. A string of binary curses and a litany of complaints follows. I just wait, since arguing with the Mechonicus simply doesn't work. They will do what they want anyway. Can I expect one of those famous relic transports to arrive at my forge world too? He asks when he calms down. The news spread fast, huh? Then again, Antax, Metallica, Tigris and Istobon already received theirs. He wants some, and feels entitled. Yes. But that is a gift only. I'll try to send more here, because you have the big shipyards. A dozen adamantium transports in one of those battleships might finish early, maybe even this century. I answer in a softer tone and turn around. He doesn't try to stop me, probably too busy cogitating the surprise news. But before we finish loading the troops and supplies, I get 200 Volcano Lance Chimeras for my armor regiment, so he did hear me anyway. Good guys, my Mechonicus friends. There is still Forge Riser to visit one day, but I wasted enough time in the Imperium. I order my fleet to gather around, and we depart for Elivar. The Weasel guy doesn't join, so he is possibly heading to Terra for his Inquisitor rank. I still don't like him. I arrive at Elivar almost on time, merely 3 months later than the navigator has estimated, which for a warp travel wasn't so bad. Other people, like Admiral Spire for example, had arrived 800 years later. He is still alive and kicking ass in the Gothic sector, on the other side of the galaxy. Sadly, Spire is too fanatical for me to contact via the Pharos soundboard, and he would surely expose me as a heretic and whatever else. The Hive planet holds huge celebrations to mark my glorious return, and the noble houses pester me with invites and proposals of every kind. From pretty concubines to requests for an officer commission or mining rights or land grants, everyone wants something from me. I am fortunate to delegate nearly everything to my family, escaping for some relaxation time and natural gravity in the blank enclave. Here I meet the future of humanity, a small village made only of blanks. Many of my children, and their children too, as well as the local blanks and their descendants are trying to live in a modicum of peace and civilization. There are 100 tech priests acting as teachers and doctors and guards, and with their presence the valley looks positively modern and advanced. Clean roads and buildings, electric lights and other comforts like swimming pools and shooting ranges. It is a good start, and I like it a lot. One after another, I also meet the next concubines, and introduce them to the joys of making babies. Rose has instead taken residence in the capital, mingling among merchants and nobles and sniffing out plots and treason. The lower levels of the hives are almost clean and repaired, with constant patrols of tech priests and servitors collecting gangers and other criminals as well as heretics or cultists. The Genstealer cult has been smashed, but vigilance is always needed. Even the pollution and other contaminants from the Orc invasion have been nearly cleansed, but again mushrooms are hard to eradicate completely. Patrols and sweeps continue every day, lest the spores germinate into an Orcwog. Because orcs disperse 1 billion of spores when they die, and we have killed millions of orcs on Elivar. What I can do is promote Marcus Minoris to a government position, overseeing research and education. We have a Manufactorum Forge ship from Estobon on the way, but until it arrives we can prepare the ground and train a tech clan clade to sufficient levels to repair or even construct simple machines like trains and tractors. I intend to make every world in my fringe empire self-sufficient in 100 years or less, and Serena has been overseeing this plan for me, conducting immigration efforts to the more unpopulated planets, sending millions of colonists and PDF regiments to protect them. Sadly, the PDF are poorly armed, using simple gunpowder weapons and explosives like stubbers and mortars, and few vehicles. Enough to deter a small orc band or minor revolts, but not for anything stronger. Time passes again, but this time I'm not hurting from age or injury. I can spend a decade doing whatever I want, and so I do. Making new STCs and more babies. Every single day. It feels great to be a teenager again. With vaccines and the new biologist-clade tech priests taking care of disease and cleanliness, the hive slowly become a bit healthier too, which increases productivity and wealth. Also, 7 huge cathedrals for the cult of the Emperor are being constructed in every hive, just as Rose requests. I am happy she has found something to do, beside terrorizing my citizens and assassinating dissenters or demagogues. Sorry guys, there will be no equal rights and freedom of religion in this galaxy. Those who have power are strong, and the rest are not. And those other gods will definitely turn you into war portals and try to eat everyone with demons or tyrannids or necrodermis. Our Big Adam isn't the best, but he is much nicer anyway. Every month, I return to the capital for another governor ball, and fake being in charge really well. Nobody seems to notice I don't rule anything. Rose has 5 children in this decade, all girls and all psychers. But one of them is both a psyker and a blank, and even seems able to predict things, which could make her a navigator with enough training. The Inquisitor is determined to mold her into her successor, because immunity to warp is quite a big gift. My special rogue trader, what a miracle you have given me. Rose whispers after a few hours of frantic lovemaking. I just hug her tight. If you take Janice to Terra, I fear she won't be allowed to survive. Rose freezes for a second, then hugs me back. What else can we do? I pat her long black hair while I think on it. Navigators are allowed nearly anything. And Metallica is working hard on my Grand Cruiser. Just like that, in a sweaty bed behind closed doors, we decide to turn Janice into a navigator. Ludvius thumbs up at me, grinning like he has heard a great joke. Yes, he still follows me everywhere, all the time. The veteran Blood Angel has become such a familiar fixture that I sometimes forget about him and talk about secrets. I raise my head and stare at Ludvius for a moment. You never heard this, my friend. Or else. I tell him in my best attempt at a threatening voice. Ludvius thinks it over and nods. Don't worry, Captain. If one such miracle can happen, then it's likely it will happen again, for my battle brothers. He replies gently, and pats his bolter with loving care. I sigh and turn back towards Rose, kissing her worried forehead. I haven't forgotten my promise to Captain Aphil, but sadly blanks are not so easy to obtain. Even the blank concubines don't give birth to other blanks every time, although the ratio is better than normal people. Still, in a decade I should have 1,000 blank people in my village, and from there it will snowball into many more. Already my sons are working hard with their own wives and concubines to produce the next generation, and with anti-aging injections they'll keep doing it for hundreds of years. Then every new generation will begin the task again, and again. Meanwhile, my fleet trains and patrols the Trader Empire, and chases off pirates or slavers. There are always slavers at the edge of the Imperium, trying to obtain valuable merchandise for mines, or even Drukari gladiator pits and torture rooms. The Dark_Eldar Corsairs always plague trade lanes for raids and terror attacks, but fortunately not anywhere near, for now. They are just as advanced as their cousins, but even more twisted and insane. Justine is raising a clade of night pilots, almost 100 of them, but with more on their way in Mechonicus gestation chambers. Those fetuses which do not survive get lost in tech priest slabs, possibly converted into organic components for blank or normal machine spirits. I don't ask and they don't tell, which keeps our mutual relations amiable. Like I said, the peace and quiet lasts a decade, then reality hits back in force. Estobon gets invaded by chaos, and sends desperate pleas to everyone they know. I convene the clan to decide what to do. We should sit this one out, Captain, Wenchen says in a worried voice. Half of the clan instantly agree with him. In truth, we did survive and prospered by avoiding demons and their worshippers as much as we could. Victor feels brave, and his uncle Varian takes the other side. We have our ships, made even by Estobon. If we don't help, everything will be solar dust, and the enemy will have a strong base in the sector. I almost agree, but still feel a great unease and danger. All true, but we have responsibilities here as well. Without us, these worlds will become feral again, and get lost to orcs or pirates once more. Volunteers may go, with as many ships we can spare. All the destroyers, I'd say. We have a dozen destroyers, 3 frigates and our light cruiser. Nothing we have would tilt the balance anyway, but 12 destroyers would be a show of force. Victor volunteers right away. We'll stop at Antax first, and see what else they can provide as help. And I should take few transport ships in case there's an evacuation. I think it over and agree. It's better if I join you till Antax. The fabricator likes me a little. Then I'll travel to Metallica and Tigris to find more help. Everyone seems happy with my decision, and there are plenty of volunteers, both for crew and ground support regiments. Each destroyer loads a tightly packed PDF regiment, though without tanks and heavy weapons they don't take that much space. I hope to obtain for them Imperial-class weaponry and tech priest support, from a friendly forge. And we go, traveling through hell to fight hell itself on the other side. We catch a good warp current and arrive at Antax just in time to meet Captain Donatus Aphil of the Blood Angels. Hastily, we renew our pact and I inform him of my progress, including the miracle birth of my blank psycho daughter. The captain is heading towards Estobon as well, and promises to look after my son and his fleet, if possible. 100 new corvettes from Antax and the Astartes battle barge rush towards the fight, along with Victor and the destroyers. At least we managed to rearm missiles and torpedoes in these few hours. Once the brave warriors leave, I stay behind to conclude business with the fabricator, downloading 100 STC patterns of various value, some mere cosmetic alterations, others nearly heretic upgrades. I know they must be valuable, if sold on the cold market or something, but our enemies would also have them, and I try to prevent that. He likes my new Volcano Chimeras but still takes the Rhino pattern for production instead. Chimeras are still light tanks and very fragile, and he prefers sturdier machines. Then I unveil the latest air superiority designs, gunships and fighters with quad-lass cannon turrets, powered by automatic reactors. They have power shields as well, which will allow few losses in the next campaigns. Land Raider tanks with Volkite carronades and even a Baneblade variant with the same gun. Lastly, I propose the Volcano-armed Sentinel, a cheap walker armed with a Knight class beam weapon able to damage Titans. It's a pity that whoever designed these STC templates didn't consider how the Lords of Terror do things. No force in the Imperium is allowed too much power, or weapons that can change the balance. Plus, a traitor regiment would be able to defeat Titans. The Fabricator General explains with a pained voice. So he likes them, but nobody will build them. I'm certain every single rogue trader in the galaxy would want at least 100 of these armed sentinels. And there are also Astartes auxiliaries, the Sisters of Battle and Inquisitor regiments and... I begin to explain before he stops me with a careless wave. He points at me and then at the cogitator screen. No need to sell me things like a trader, Lord Pef. I know my clients very well. Just pick and choose what you think will be useful. I sigh inward and wish Jaren was here. So I pick and choose, filling the hangars with space fighters, and tanks and another grenadier regiment. The litany arrived at Antax empty after all, since there was no point transporting troops and fighters to my supply base. I came here to collect. I then tap a few more Vortex torpedoes and a dozen Vortex missiles that were fighter-launched. The warp rifts would damage Chaos battleships just as they did the Tyrannid Hive ship, and fighters could enter atmosphere and fire the missiles at Chaos Titans. Sure, there will be no silence to repair the rift, but I considered the traitors the greater danger. Demons could not pass through Geller fields but traitor Astartes could. They did teleport on Navy ships all the time. You're heading directly to Astobon now? The Fabricator asks, showing displeasure with a metal hand. Visiting a few more forges first. The siege will take a decade at least. I explain in a calm voice, since I do have some experience how things work in this grim future. He rubs a few tentacles, like trying to decide something important. Then, I guess it's time to unveil my secret weapon. Come, let's take the teleporter right here, he says in a suspicious tone. We blink through warp to a defense station in orbit, then again and again till we reach the destination. The Lament for the Vanquished, being repaired and upgraded with everything the Mechonicus has best, transformed into battlecruiser in armor, weapons and capability. But not a paper tiger like the Navy has. I sit in the command chair and sense the Lament remembers me, and shows me proudly what it can do. From electric arc weapons, to neutron radial cannons and a gravity lance that can split moons with their own mass turned inward. 1,000,000 Skitarii form the ship's void marine garrison, while weapons and vehicles fill every hangar and barrack on board. It's not yet finished, as the tech priests are still installing triple reactor and void shields, but it would take perhaps 5 years to complete. There are a dozen huge landers that possibly could carry Titans. This grav lance would work wonders on the Tyrannids. I muse out loud as I sit up from the chair and walk around the bridge. It is different from normal Navy ships, as most controls and sensors are designed to interface with tech priest mechadendrites and implants. Although it's not a normal Mechonicus name, the ship remains the Lament, in your honor, Lord Lancefire. The Fabricator replies instead, avoiding the sensitive subject. Just make sure to check and triple-check all sensors to operate in autistic mode, at the right time. Scrap code or Necron engrams would make a coffin of it. I conclude and turn back, towards the teleporter. The Fabricator doesn't reply, so I know the orders for strict security are being sent to all the shipyard tech priests. In a few seconds of violet light, we return to the litany, without passing through his quarters. Teleports are so useful. I hear you have some blank wives and kids on board. He tells me without any ulterior motive. Ludvius arrives at a sprint, possibly upset I escaped his watch. Yes, we can visit the nursery, and we can play doctor and medic for an hour. Just remember, Esteban used orbital bombardments to pacify their failed experiments. And now that they possibly worked, the enemy has arrived to stop them. I warn him in a mild voice. We do so, and the Archmago's fakes being a biologist margus well enough. Samples are taken and stored away, concubine fertile eggs get harvested and kept in a cryogenic capsule. The kids get tested with some strange device bearing a blood angel symbol, like a black drop of blood with wings. No doubt Captain Afail has delivered the device for this exact purpose. Then I get tested as well, just in case. Ludvius holds a thumb up as the symbol turns red. I think I would enjoy having you as a neophyte, Perf Lancefire. At least you'd have to listen and stay put. He comments wryly. It would be a mess, I'm certain. I don't take orders well, too used to being in command. Also, I like having balls. I mutter in a ballsy voice. An Astartes is more than a man, and being implanted with the Emperor's immortal genocide would transfer some of those powers into me. It would even work, as the gene test shows. Sergeant Ludvius nods in approval. I'm sure you'll find a way, Captain. You always do. He says in a completely devout voice, which only shows how naive he is. Sure, I try to find the best solution, if I can. But nobody can do it forever. I say goodbye to the nice fabricator and then depart for Metallica. Rose meets me in my bedroom, and sits in my lap as I keep working on simpler and acceptable machines for the Imperial Guard. A multiple rocket launcher would be useful and cheap, since chemical rockets are considered primitive tech. I still give them a multi-laser, because the Guard is always overrun by some enemy. Might as well kill more of those enemies. A cheap attack gunship, with a nose gimbal for an autocannon and 2 large banks of crack missiles, to serve as anti-tank support. I consider giving it a power shield, but that would need a small reactor, so no. The same for the Sentinel. I arm one hand with a chainsaw and the other with a rotary autocannon. Pretty much a minigun, but nicer. Still has a promethium-based engine, still no shield. What I can do, is give it horizontally folding shutters, that can be closed to defend the pilot from arrows or bullets or claws. Pretty much window blinds, made from plasteel. I bet the army will love them, as cheap and replaceable knights. I call it the Strongman Sentinel, because it has arms. Then I devolve deeper, and create a very simple tracked vehicle with an autocannon and a flamer using the same promethium reservoir as the engine. Small and nimble and light, but has a centimeter of ceramite on the plasteel glacis, so it counts as armor. Only 3 guards crew, because it is meant to provide close support to patrols and convoys and burn down entrenched enemies. I call it the Weasel, for absolutely no reason. Then we arrive at Metallica and get welcomed warmly, but without laser cannons this time. How times change. I immediately focus my attention on the half-finished Grand Cruiser, being swarmed in tech priests and servitors, cranes and grav lifters and more unknown machines. Already looks grand and imposing, and one of its lance batteries even tracks my litany as we approach. Still needs more work, but at least some parts are operational. Half of the armor plating is peeled off, and I can see the extra internal bulkheads and plasteel anti-spalling reinforcement being welded on the inside. Just as promised. The other cruiser has been moved farther into the asteroid field, barely detectable under another swarm of Mechanicus machines. It appears completely dismantled right now, probably for deep scans and reverse engineering like I first suspected. I'm still debating between naming the ship as Liturgy for the Vanquished or simply the Vanquisher. The latter name is kinda grand, and deserves at least a battleship, so I guess it will be the Liturgy. A proper Imperium name, pious and modest, yet still menacing. This is Perf Lancefire. Are we allowed to dock with Forge Metallica? I send via the Vox channel. You are welcome, rogue trader. Set course for Dockyard ETA-09. A polite but mechanical transmission arrives in a minute. Meanwhile, I check the other ships in the system. At least 1,000 corvettes, the regular Navy kind, and the same Mechanicus defensive fleet, which has grown a bit, with another battlecruiser and 20 new destroyers. They are all holding station in a star shell pattern, almost like preparing to be attacked. Makes sense to be cautious, given what happens at Istobon, and many other forged worlds in the Imperium. In fact, forged worlds are amazingly valuable and critical to the Imperium of Man, because they are rare and also the only producers of ships and advanced technology. A clever enemy could cripple humanity simply by targeting a dozen important forged worlds. Of course, many of these enemies try again, and sometimes they succeed. I would keep at least 1,000 ships over every forged world, just for this purpose, but there aren't enough of them. Soon enough, I meet the Fabricator, and he comes with 2 other high-ranked tech priests as escorts. "Well met, Archmagos," I say politely and nod in respect. "You've grown younger, Lord Pef. Someone did you a favor?" the Fabricator asks while changing focus on Ludvius. "My guard has also received an injection boost, and 7 brain implants, as well as upgrades to his bionic eye and a power armor. It seems they also help control his rage, which would be a valuable gift if the raging maniacs would accept it. I have a feeling they'd prefer unleashing the beast to an implant that forces logical thoughts and organizes memories on data stacks." I just sigh. People on Istobon were very kind. So, I aim to help them if possible. "Always heading into battle, even with that flimsy light cruiser of yours?" the other Fabricator asks in a curious voice. An electrical discharge swirls around him for no reason. Possibly one of the Psychomagi. He still has human eyes, so I'm not certain. "I do hope for a nicer ship, Margus. Like the one getting upgraded right now," I admit with a sad voice. "I would like a big powerful ship to cruise in safety and blast Xenos with impunity. But I have to earn it." "How about, we give you an Overlord-class battlecruiser instead?" the third tech priest asks in a mild voice. I don't know him, or what faction he might be from. But I can calculate conjectures quite fast. It's a 7th thing. "Forge Riser?" I ask to make sure. The Margus waves a tentacle politely and some chip changes tentacles among the priests. Damn it, they had a bet about me, isn't it? "Yes, Captain Pef Lancefire. If you wouldn't come to us, we came to you. Hope you don't mind." The tech priest chides me politely so I'm not the lowest rank anymore. Soon, the big wigs will expect I come to grovel in front of them too. "And you waited here, because I had a relationship with Metallica for a long time, so I would return for certain," I conclude sadly, and they just stare at me like it was obvious. "Well, it's not, you big brains. I'm only human, if a slightly smarter one. What do you say, Lord Pef? Will you agree to trade us that Grand Cruiser?" the Riser Margus demands a bit louder. "Okay. On one hand, that cruiser isn't ready and won't be for a few decades. On the same hand, I want a powerful Overlord-class battle cruiser. But on the last hand, why? Something is hidden on this kind of relic ships. Something a forged world would pay billions of thrones to discover. With a condition, tech priest. Firstly, you announce the Navy about this gift. Then, when the liturgy exploration is complete, you share with me what you find. Only the knowledge, not whatever object or creature interests you. And the name stays, Liturgy for the Vanquished. I pronounce in a final tone. Take it or leave it." The 2 tech priests consult each other via coded tentacle handshakes. "Agreed, Pef Lancefire. But only you, not guards or family. We might also require your expertise for decrypting ancient templates," he proclaims with another shower of sparks and currents. "Fabricator, if I'm to take charge of the new Overlord, it will need slight modifications, for my comfort," I asked the leader of Forge Metallica. He waves it off as unimportant. "You're a valued friend and ally of the cult Mechonicus, Lord Pef. Come, let me serve you that sweet wine you enjoy, from Terra." The big robot priest commands in a metallic voice, and escorts me away from the Riser priests. Ludvius has to wait outside this time, because heresy isn't healthy in the Imperium. "You have found more STC patterns, Captain." The Margus wonders after I sip some wine and think over my needs. Istobon has figured out how to build blank machine spirits. Possibly with the aid of all those biologist magi that fled from Scapula. Risky, but very valuable, even if only for the Inquisition and Astartes. Mechonicus as well, since machines. I announce after a minute of polite silence. He nods cautiously while he thinks it over. Big risks indeed, going by that large chaos invasion. I just shrug. The Immaterium poisons everything, Fabricator. Even Primarchs and their legions have fallen. Yet, every species in the galaxy fights the demons, even Tyranids and Necrons. But unlike them, humanity and our machines are not immune. With a blur of tentacles, I lose my hair, and some blood and skin layers. It would be a great gift indeed, Lord Pef. But we'd need fertile females and infants for comparison and sequencing. He comments while storing the valuable cells in biocontainers and stasis boxes. Still no common sense, just like all the tech priests. They just take, without even asking. I have them and I can prove they're fertile. On board the Litany. And there's something else. Even bigger. I whisper in a soft voice. He nods and points discreetly at the corner of the meeting room. Ancient relics, machines and computer boards on various designs stand on display, glowing with data engrams and shimmering in bluish stasis fields. Something is there, but invisible for me. I take out my data slates and start unveiling the trade goods, taking care not to reveal anything incriminating. The new Sentinel will get produced, as will the crack Valkyries and the Metal Storm, my multiple missile launcher made from a cheap Chimera chassis and various Manticore designs mixed and matched to fit. I mean, nearly any enemy would not like having 100 missiles crashing on its units, though Necrons would likely just regenerate and keep going. It takes heavier weapons to defeat a tomb world, and a whole hive fleet to exhaust a Necron dynasty, like I did at Mandragora. Even so, the Necrons have survived, for now, though the next tendril of hive fleet Kraken won't have only 1 billion bioships, but 10 times more. I give them even odds to defeat that, even with their ancient weapons. Craft World Yanden keeps fighting the bulk of the hive fleet, with very advanced technology and weapons. But their numbers are small and getting even smaller. An armada of Eldar Corsair struggles to cut airway though and aid the craft world to save the famous world ship, which gives humanity some respite from constant raids and harassment. Hundreds of human worlds are still in the way, as are orc empires and many other species. We need more guns, and fast. And we need ships to stop as many in space, before they reach fertile ground and start multiplying like bugs. Well, they are bugs. The more advanced weaponry and templates will be reserved in small numbers for Astartes and other special privileged soldiers. I will depart for Tigris next, Fabricator. Want to visit the Litany and see my children? I offer innocently. He does. And after another medical checkup, me and the Fabricator go to visit Rose and Justine, deep into the ship's vault. Justine keeps trying to learn how to use the sounding board but keeps failing. Rose has a small success, being able to locate our acolytes and agents even across the sector. No mental communication yet, but it will come. She refuses 7th implants, because some secrets might be revealed that way. I'm pretty sure that if some Dark Eldar or Chaos Sorcerer gets me, I wouldn't last today, so they wouldn't need to download memories or other such complicated procedures. Hot irons are scary enough. Then again, I do have a squad of Astartes guarding me, a bodyguard that lives in my room, a whole regiment on my ship, and then a whole ship filled with guns and torpedoes. I like being safe, what can I say? This galaxy is quite dangerous, you know. This is a Xeno artifact, the Fabricator concludes with a single glance. And I am an Inquisitor of Ordo Xenos. Rose declares proudly and shows her rosette for a whole second. Then a tense silence lasts a minute, the two minions of the Imperial Aquila holding a power contest with invisible meanings and methods. The sign of the Imperium is a double-headed eagle, one head for the Emperor and one head for Mars, the original forged world. These two are lower on the scale, but still act as if there were two eagles, instead of just one body. How many bodies does the Aquila has? I wonder out loud. Both of them glance at me with annoyance and aggravation. One body, with two heads. The Fabricator allows in sad voice, then spills some sanctified oil on the stasis chamber. Still a priest, right at his heart. This is the device Primarch Gilliam has used to form his Imperium Secundus, and illuminate Ultramar in the warp, some 10 millennia ago. Right now it is focused on Mandragora, the capital of the Necron-soaked dynasty. Thus, the Tyranids flock to it, drawn by the psychic beacon and hope for rich biomass worlds. I explain politely, Then I focus my mind and use the mental Wi-Fi to continue. It has more abilities built into it, like exchanging messages at distance, and even teleporting people. What distances are possible? What about the shadow in the warp? He asks in a hopeful voice and turns again to examine the device. As it is now, about 100 light years. At least 100 times more, when installed into the original location, but that place is toast right now. I answer with a tiny shrug. I can speak with my acolytes through the silence, archmagos. And I normally can't even lift a page if caught inside the Tyrannid shadow. So it's not my psycho power. Rose admits with softer voice, and start pouring tea for everyone. She had this null-box cylinder that she uses to keep the tea at just the right temperature. The Archmagos also tests the tea, dipping a sipping straw into his cup. Very well. Do you at least know what species made it? I hesitate for a second. Either the old ones, or their enemies, the Catan. Either way, it has a Catan shard as a power source. I explain in a soft voice. Both of them recoil visibly, because even a fragment of a god is still divine, and thus dangerous. This is much bigger, like you said, Lord Pef. But a stasis field will not contain such a thing. The fabricator mutters among sparks and chants. This is merely the dialing console. The Catan is still on the planet where I found this device. I say a bit more confident. Knowledge is power, and I had bits that nobody else knew. The Mechonicus priest hums in Binharik, and holds out a few devices to test the ambient atmosphere. No radiation, no warp emanations, not that I expected any, so close to the Geller generator. Yeah, the board uses some kind of empathic mind link. Perhaps similar to a blank machine spirit. But alien or not, humanity needs to create something with the same ability. Sector-wide communications, and not going through the warp. I proclaim, pointing at the shimmering blue field, with a sounding board inside. Copying the device would be heresy. Rose says in a colder voice. I know, damn woman. Shoot yourself in the head as well, because thinking is heresy too. Copying the device is impossible anyway. Humanity lacks advanced science and bright minds, and most would just take a warhammer and smash this console just for fun. The cockheads could help, but they lack common sense and would likely awaken a Catan out of curiosity. I mutter in a fit of despair. The fabricator almost argues back, before standing down and trying to look innocent. So, what will you do? The Inquisitor asks me in a worried voice. That's between me and the Emperor. Out in the fringe, I speak with his voice. And with this device, he can speak to me as well. I conclude the meeting on a harsher tone. Rose raises a finger to object, then turns towards the stasis field in reverence. I suppose it can work. But the enemy would notice and come after you. Not to mention the priesthood and all the high lords. Yeah, I don't gather troops and ships for a deck. I suppose those corvettes are mine, fabricator? I ask rhetorically. Only half, Lord Pef. I'm now less inclined to part with such a potent defense, especially if my forge world embarks on that blank spirit quest. But we will build more. You will have thousands more in a century. He says in a pleading tone. Half is still good. Lady Inquisitor, you can take command of the fleet and the Overlord, and we'll meet at Estobon. I tell my Rose with a heavy heart. I'd prefer to be in command from the start, but Estobon might fall till then. Soon enough, the litany departs for Forge Tigris, where another fleet should be ready. My cruiser seems a bit empty now, without the Inquisitor and her retinue, including my mother. I have Ludvius, that's true. But Jaron is gone and so is Minoris. Most of the bridge crew and all the regiment officers are new, the old ones being promoted or dead. Wenchen is quite happy though. An overlord might be a bit smaller, Captain. But it's new and modern and has speed. We need speed, because we are always outnumbered. I kinda agree. Even with upgrades, a Grand Cruiser would be slow as hell. And I lack psychers to increase that speed via warp magic. Plasma engines are much safer and reliable than a psyker, unless that psyker is also a blank, like my daughter Janice. It is possible I'm also a psyker? It's not, Lord Pef. You're as weak and fragile like any human. My Astartes friend replies for me. Wait, I said that out loud, huh? Is your implant working right, my friend? I ask the Space Marine while he stands behind me to watch me work on the holoscreen.
Oh yes. I'm recording everything right now. This is a great tool for mission reports,
he explains in a half-joking tone. I sigh inward and think what to prepare for Forge Tigris. Another Sentinel, with a las cannon instead of the cheaper autocannon, a better Auspex sensor and increase the capacitor size a bit. Now the Mech Walker could act in anti-armor role as well as sentry and recon. Still has the armored blinds, because claws and bullets hurt. Another variant is better armored, including a sealed cockpit for driver and gunner. Iridium tungsten plates, a power shield and a small plasma reactor, all increase cost a few times, but now the Retribution pattern Sentinel can match a weeknight in durability. Plus it could be operated in any atmosphere, even toxic or in vacuum. Perhaps Tigris could make 1,000 of them for my armor regiments, even if nobody else orders them. Another gunship, a sort of attack helicopter but held by anti-grav engines, with a twin cockpit, also armored in iridium and shielded, with a quad multi-laser turret and 2 las cannons under the stubby wings, as well as 20 hunter-killer missiles, in retractable pockets. The Astra Militarum lacks air support the most, something incredible for me. They have spaceships and space fighters, but little in the vein of atmospheric ground support. I decide to designate it as a Retribution pattern grav tank STC template. Perhaps then the Imperium will allow generals to order these machines as tanks instead of aircraft. We arrive at Forge Tigris to find it under attack by Eldar Corsairs, although the world has thousands of fast corvettes for defense, so the Eldar can't really find a weak spot. I launch my space fighters and even arm 2 of them with vortex missiles. The Eldar may think themselves elusive and protected by holographic fields, but the 2 pilots are my blank daughters, training to become ship officers. The Augury long-range scanner marks the Corsairs as the Balestorm Avengers, a pirate band usually plundering the eastern fringe. Approaching an Eldar cruiser, warhead released. Finola Lancefire announces on by Vox speed, as she banks the fighter away and speeds to maximum. The Vortex missile isn't nearly as strong as a torpedo, but then Eldar warships are not very durable. They rely on their Void Dreamers for navigation, which wouldn't detect a blank pilot or sense their intentions. The warhead sensor locks on the cruiser's engine. A flash of violet light, and the front half of the cruiser drifts on, while the engines have vanished into the warp, along with the engine room and the solar sails on the back. The Corsairs immediately start fleeing from my fighters, and soon vanish into the void. You better run, alien scum. Well done, daughter. All fighters, maintain protective cover. Lance batteries, target the warp rift and fire till it's closed. I command as I lean back in my captain chair. We're fortunate enough that no demon champion was around on the other side, so we escape without too many invading demons crossing over. The lances keep firing for an hour, until the spinning gateway pops like a balloon. A few assault boats with servitors and tech priests depart to secure the derelict. As it happens, Eldar ships mount all their advanced weaponry on the front, and thus we capture all of their weapons. I bet Forge Tigris will love a few of them. Captain Lancefire, you have returned, in the nick of time. A familiar, female voice speaks from the Vox channel. Oh, it's that Fabricator Locum, or the XO of a forged world. Glad to be of service, Fabricator. We should meet and talk. My place or yours? I ask with a faint hint of flirting. A long silence follows, which means something. Anyway, I still have to wait for the priests to. Heavy resistance on the cruiser, request support. A crackled transmission emerges from the void box. I turn toward to my side the Astartes, who were nearly bouncing up and down in excitement. Go have fun, boys. I tell them, copying my rose. Their captain smiles politely. I will stay this time. Rookie, you lead the squad. For the Emperor. For duty. They answer in a manly chorus, then all run towards another shuttle.